Thanks everyone for your questions about the Around Britain and Ireland race. I'll try and get through as many as I can. So first question, if you'd run out of food, which crew member would have been first to go? Well, we weren't quite at that stage. Actually, the food rationing went quite well because we'd allowed for 4,000 calories a person a day, which is what you burn when you're really driving the boat hard. But in the lighter airs, we weren't using that many calories, so it was really easy to just halve the amount of calories that we were eating per day and make the food extend. As to who would have gone first, I can't really answer that question, but there was one person I knew I was very safe from, and that was Ben, our French navigator, because he didn't much like the English menu. Can I ask what you learned about sailing in slack conditions that you could carry forward? Is it about sail area? So I learned a lot about light wind sailing, and I kind of wish I'd known that earlier in the season, because in the Vendée Arctique we had some really challenging conditions, very similar. We had to get across a ridge of high pressure. I think one of the things that I kind of learned, that everything that we did I sort of knew already, so it's just kind of reinforcing the basic principles, getting all the weight forward, getting the weight to leeward. But you know, one of the interesting things I learned was it's not all about sail area. Actually, you need to consider the weight of the sail as well, especially in a boat the size of Medallia and Imoca. The weight of the sail is important, so sometimes in super light airs you're better off using a smaller sail because it's lighter and therefore it fills when the wind does come. It's easier to fill and drive the boat. Will there be an increase in Imoca and Class 40 entrants in the future? I really hope so. One of the reasons why we took part in the Round Britain and Ireland race is because it is a fantastic race. It's brilliant, but it's also kind of supporting the incredible offshore circuit that we have in the UK. It's difficult because Imoca and Class 40 have their own circuit. And unless, you know, a race like Round Britain and Ireland is named on their circuit, then everyone is kind of, you know, to enter these races costs money for everyone, and so they're trying to understand where they should use their budget. And for foreign boats to come over and compete, you know, we had a Danish boat and a German boat and a French entry in the Round Britain and Ireland race, but it is becoming increasingly difficult to attract, you know, these bigger classes into the races because there's so much other stuff to do. But you know, I hope that in the future we might be able to talk to them about including these races in their programme, and certainly for next year the Fastnet is one of the named races on the Imoca calendar, so we're going to see a huge entry of Imocas in the Fastnet next year. Did you have a coffee after fixing the coffee grinder? What alternative do you have if you hadn't fixed it? So I think there was much amusement about us fixing the coffee grinder. So the coffee grinder is just kind of the name that we give to the pedestal in the middle of the boat that drives the winches, which we lost some bearings out of in the handles and needed to fix halfway round. There is an alternative to that, and that is to top grind the winches. So every winch has a conventional slot in the top of it that you put a regular winch handle in, and you can top grind the winches. It works perfectly well, it just takes a lot longer. How did you cope with all the extra bodies on board? You need to adjust to sailing with other people. I mean, there's a huge amount of benefit to it. It's less physically demanding for me. There are more brains to solve problems. There is less stress around managing risk on your own. But we were sailing a boat that is designed to be sailed by one person, and the cockpit was designed around one person. So sometimes kind of moving around people on the boat could be difficult, and inevitably, because we're all, you know, experienced offshore ocean racing sailors, we all kind of have the same feeling that we want to be in the optimum place on the boat, to see the sails. You know, when a rope needs easing, then kind of everyone gravitates towards that rope to do it. And so you kind of do need to dance around each other a little bit, and sometimes just accept the fact that someone else is standing where you might want to stand. But you know, I was really lucky and careful actually in the crew that I selected for this trip, and we all slotted in really nicely around each other. For manoeuvres, we had set positions, so everybody knew where they were going and what they were doing, and it was some adjustment, but it worked really well. Do you use a predictive wind program and the boat polars to determine your course? Yes. So the navigation is done on a PC on the boat, and we use a software program called Adrena, and then I have a second software program as well called Expedition, and I run routes, or in this case Ben was running routes, using the two programs and various different wind models, so that we can look at the different options that are available to us to navigate through weather systems. In terms of where we get our weather information from, then I use a program called Squid, which is from Great Circle. I use Predict Wind. We download current weather information and satellite images both through Predict Wind and also through an online program called Windy. So I'm just always using multiple sources. I have favourites to go to. It does take a lot of time, and the interesting thing about working with a navigator is because the navigator is solely looking at kind of weather and routing, then Ben had a lot more time than I normally have to look at different weather sources. So I was very interested to see the sources that he favoured. But when I go back to sailing on my own, you know, I will have a fraction of the time that he had to keep on top of that weather. So you kind of need to have your favourite sources and go to them and kind of maximise the information that you're getting in a small amount of time. What's it like to do the social media, and how much time and effort is dedicated to streaming rather than sailing and trimming? It's great to get the live updates, really makes it real for us, but it must come at a cost. Thank you. And yes, you're right, it does come at a cost. And if we were, you know, purely head down sailing, then, you know, inevitably you would see a gain in performance. And for crewed racing, like for example the ocean race, then they have an onboard reporter whose job is purely to document what's going on so that the sailors can get on with sailing. When I'm on my own, I have to manage my own social media, and while we went out with the team for Round Britain and Ireland, then I managed all of the filming and the documenting, as well as skippering the boat. And it does come at a cost, but you know, there's a net gain for everyone. Obviously we are sponsored, and one of the returns that our sponsors expect is that we share what we're doing with people. But also, you know, I am very keen on trying to make the sport that I love more accessible to more people, because the more people follow it, the more people enjoy it, then, you know, the greater number of people are going to want to get into it into the future, but also we'll see more investment, more interest, more coverage by mainstream media. And so, you know, like everything, you have to work at it. You have to work at it, and I'm always trying to think about interesting, creative ways that we can share what we're doing, and I do enjoy it, and you know, I'm really pleased that so many people engage with it and enjoy following us. Would it make that much difference to performance to take more freeze-dried tea bags, etc. when required? It would have eased the stress of no wind, which must be mentally exhausting. I also think that you have longer races to take some fresh food, which would boost morale, like Giancarlo did. He likes to cook pasta dishes. So I think on the food, we did take extra. So what happened with this forecast was a second ridge of high pressure appeared that we hadn't seen on our start day forecast. So we were expecting to finish in 8 days, and we took 9 days worth of food, but also knowing that we could ration the food that we had. So in reality, we did take extra food, and actually we didn't run out. We just rationed it, and that worked absolutely well. And you're completely right, on something like the Vendée, then I do take extra food. On the last Vendée, I took food for 110 days, and I finished in 95, so I had plenty of food on the boat. In terms of fresh food, I take lots and lots of fresh fruit, and I just don't feel the need for anything else. I know other skippers enjoy kind of eggs and pasta and that sort of thing, but for me, I like my freeze-dried food. I'm not a massive, I don't put a massive emphasis on what I'm eating. So long as it's hot and palatable, then that's enough for me. And so the extra faff of needing to cook just wouldn't bring me personally that much comfort. But I know for other skippers it does, and this is all about individual choices and doing what's right for you. Does the Maine have a manual or hydraulic cullingham as in the America's Cup? No, it doesn't. So the only hydraulic systems I have on the boat are a hydraulic ram to move the keel, which is powered by a 48 volt capacitor, and 2 hydraulic rams to rake the foils, which are manually powered. Everything else is done with ropes. There are some, I think there's one boat in the fleet that has a hydraulic outhaul system. I think that's the new 11th hour, which they're going to be racing in the ocean race. But everything else on my boat is rope powered and through the winches in the cockpit. How can the sailing community help to encourage the media to report on sailing events such as this and SailGP? So yes, I agree that it would be amazing if we had more mainstream media coverage, but we are really proud of what we have achieved. We have great partnerships with the Times and the Telegraph, and with BBC South, BBC East, ITV South. I think we need to view online presence as, a form of media, and that is largely how most people are consuming kind of sailing events now, through YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. And I think, we can show support and help bring other people into our own sailing community by sharing as much as we can on social media, liking, posting, commenting, telling people about it. And kind of the more people that are aware of the sport, the more demand there is going to be to watch it. And I think that will slowly filter up into mainstream media, I hope. Do you think you were any quicker with crew? Undoubtedly, you are quicker with crew, because you don't have the downtime. When I'm on my own, there is some time where the boat is just sailing on its own and I'm asleep, and there's time when I can't move weight around the boat and adjust sails because I'm fixing things or I'm downloading weather. I inevitably miss things. I try to sail to 100%, but it's pretty hard when you're on your own. So definitely the fact that there's always somebody whose responsibility is kind of making the boat go quickly when you're fully crewed, that it inevitably means that you do go faster. Is Harkin helping to evaluate as to how the coffee grinder managed to fall apart in calm conditions? So I think the first thing to say there is that the coffee grinder is an original part from when the boat was first built in 2015. So the coffee grinder has been around the world twice. It sailed a lot of very, very full-on miles. And the reason that it fell apart was because it's suffering from corrosion on the inside and wear and tear on some of the metallic parts, which kind of is just because it's at the end of its life. We are scheduled to replace it later on this year. I just need to kind of nurse it through the route to run, because we haven't put in our budget to replace it until our big refit at the end of the year. And yes, we'd love to talk to Harkin about a partnership on that. Although a crewed race, is the boat easier or harder to sail than the last one? Did Lasso talk the whole way around? Well, I'll answer the second part of that question first. No, Lasso doesn't talk in his sleep. And the first part is, so I've generally found that this new boat, the new Imoca, is easier to sail than the last one. It's less physically demanding than the last one because it's better designed, the loads are lighter, the ergonomics are better, there's a big flat foredeck to drag things around on, so kind of as a human being, it's less effort to sail the boat. However, I would say probably mentally it's more challenging because there are more variables to work with when you're trying to get the max speed out of the boat. So there's definitely more for me to learn, and it's more taxing from a kind of brain point of view. Did you have any leftover meals? Yes, we did. We had enough leftover food to go for another day with a full menu and 2 days with a reduced menu. There was a lot of upwind sailing during the race. How difficult would it have been if you would have been with no extra crew? I think it would have been more challenging. Probably less. The straight upwind sailing when you're on your own actually is not that hard. Because there's less things to change and to manage. It's the light airs that I think would have been much more difficult to manage on my own, because it's in the light airs you've got to constantly be updating your weather information, looking at sort of current situation with satellite images, moving things around the boat, trying new things, tweaking sails, and actually that there's a lot of actions to carry out during light airs, which does make it harder for one person to do well in the light airs. What have you learned from having a full crew that will help you on the next Vendée? I've learned a huge amount actually. Every single person looked at the problem of getting the boat moving or sustaining speed in a different way. They all had things to add into the equation. And it was a real privilege to sail with such experienced people. So I've learned a lot about sail trim, about weather routing, different techniques for sail handling and manoeuvres, and just a lot of things to think about when I'm moving forwards into sailing back on my own again. How many miles was upwind? I'm not sure about miles, but I would definitely say that about 60% of the course was upwind. So if that was a straight line, it would be over 1,000 miles, I would say. Do you race with a loose-footed or a fixed-footed main, and if so, why? So our main, as pretty much all racing mains are now, is loose-footed. And that's because not having that foot of the main actually attached into the boom allows you to create a better shape when you ease the outhaul downwind. Which food were you glad to have, and which food did you not touch? So for me, my favourite remains the fish and potato with parsley sauce. I didn't touch any of the meals that had meat in them, and the guys had a bit of a skerfuffle over the 4 packets of biltong that we had on board. And we actually got into quite a bit of swapsies towards the end of the race. And some of the meals had higher values than others, and I would pretty much swap anything for a fish and potato and parsley. Were we hungry at the end of the race? No, we weren't. Did you get more sleep with a crew? Yes, most definitely. So we were running 3 hours on, 3 hours off on the watches, and then Ben just slept when he needed to. He was out of watch. For me, I didn't sleep every 3 hours because there were other things that I needed to do: boat maintenance, regular checks, working with Ben on some of the navigation, and of course all the media stuff. But I definitely got a lot more sleep than I normally would. Did you have a finish time sweepstake amongst the team? No, we didn't. We missed a trick there, I think. How are you? Thank you for asking. I'm really great. Yeah, still kind of working through my post-race fatigue, but looking forward to the next couple of months when we're in pool and things are a bit more stable. Other than your main sail, what was your most used sail? So the most used sail was our fractional code 0. So that's the smallest one of the sails that we fly off the end of the bowsprit, and we can use that for heavy airs off the wind, but also for light airs upwind. So we used it a lot for light airs upwind. Was it more difficult than expected? No, I know this is a hard race. Everybody goes into this race knowing it's a hard race. I think it was a different sort of difficult though. We were expecting physically demanding with lots of wind and big waves, but actually it was mentally demanding with the light airs. What did you love the most, and what's been the biggest lesson learned? So just actually when we were becalmed, we saw a lot of whales and dolphins, and that was amazing, and being able to kind of be so physically close to them because we were just sailing quite slowly was incredible. And also when we were on the west coast of Ireland, there were spring tides, so we had a full moon rising just as the sun was setting, which created the most incredible light. Very, very beautiful. Biggest lesson learned was actually about reducing sail area in lighter airs to kind of create less weight in the sail that you're using, which enables the boat to drive more easily. What was the top speed and the lowest speed? I think probably our top speed was 22 knots, and that was as we were approaching the Scillies. And our lowest speed, I don't think we ever dropped below 1 knot, but our lowest speed would have been about 1.2 or 1.3 knots. What was the most mentally challenging obstacle in preparation for the race? Preparing for the race, really, it's kind of, for me, it's the first time that I've raced with a crew on this boat, double-handed or any sort of crew. So I really wanted the boat to be ready and in good condition, and I wanted my team to feel like they were stepping onto a fully prepped boat. So I felt quite a lot of pressure over that, and kind of coming in the middle of the holiday. It's a difficult time to pull everything together, and we've been very busy, a small team as ever, being very busy. So I think just the pressure of having other people on the boat, I felt that a lot to start off with. How do you stay motivated and keep focused when you're stuck in an almost dead calm? So it really helped to be in a watch system there, because you only needed to stay focused for 3 hours, and you just become really grateful for every single tiny puff of wind and every single tenth of a knot that you gain, and it kind of almost becomes a little game. Let's try this, let's try that, who can trim the sail the best, who can get the boat moving. So you just have to really want to get out of the high pressure, and the only out of the high pressure is kind of sailing the boat forwards. Tips for downwind sailing in a laser. My tip is ask a laser sailor. I can't help you with that one. How do you deal with periods of no wind? Just really focus on making the most of what you have. Don't think about what you haven't got. Try and make the most of what you do have. When in light airs, would you have picked different sails without crew? No, definitely not. The sail selection would have been the same. My sail changes might not have been so rapid, but I definitely would have been using the same sails. What was your favourite bit of coastline? So the west coast of Ireland was absolutely beautiful. The light when we were there was incredible. But actually what was really nice for me was seeing the Shetland Islands in the sun, which I've never seen before. This is my 3rd time rounding the Shetlands, and every time has been very bad visibility and huge winds. So kind of seeing it glowing in the sunlight was really special. What was the sleep cycle like with little wind? So the sleep cycle kind of doesn't really change when with the wind conditions when you're fully crewed, because you run a fairly tight watch, and we were doing 3 hours on, 3 hours off. What we did change was where we slept in the boat. So a lot of the time, because we needed the weight forward, we were sleeping right in the bow, right in the very bow of the boat, and we would only come and sleep back in the living area when the breeze increased. What was the hardest part? The hardest part was definitely up the west coast of Ireland, when the high pressure that we were trying to get across kept moving north with us and expanding. And it was just very difficult to deal with the frustration, and then acknowledging the fact that the race was going to be a day or 2 days longer than we'd hoped for. So it was just kind of the mental adjustment and reframing of what the race was going to be like for us, and how we needed to achieve success.